Okay, this is the first lecture for the summer digital modeling class, also known as 3D modeling. And this is for beginners who are just starting out in our program that want to learn 3D modeling for games or an animation, or maybe just for some other visual arts related reason. So since it's the summer class, it's quite condensed. So we're going to have to move pretty quickly. Um, In this lecture in particular, we're going to cover modeling some simple objects so you can complete your first assignment. This assumes that you have opened up a Blender at least once before and navigated 3D space. Maybe you know how to add some objects and things like that. We will cover that very briefly and then get right into modeling. So very quick review in Blender. I created a new file. It's a general file. I deleted my cube and my camera and my lamp, so I have nothing in my scene currently. If you hold the middle mouse button, you can orbit your scene. If you scroll your middle mouse button or your mouse wheel, you can zoom in and out. And if you hold shift and middle mouse button, then you can pan. And those three functions should allow you to navigate 3D space. You can also accomplish the same thing by using this gizmo here, click and drag, or if you click on an axis, you could sort of snap to that view in an orthographic way. Orthographic meaning there's no perspective, it's completely flat. And then if you kind of use the orbit to grab the scene and start orbiting, it'll pop back to perspective. You can also zoom in and out by clicking and dragging on this magnifying glass icon. And then you can pan the same way by clicking and dragging horizontally or vertically on this hand icon. So that's really basic navigation. I'm going to add an object to manipulate. So I'm going to go to Add, Mesh, Cube. Here's my cube. It's in my scene. I know that it's selected because it is outlined in orange. And once I create my new object, I get this little menu here, which allows me to change the default settings, which I will just keep the way they are. If you click in empty space, you will deselect your object. Object is now no longer highlighted. I can also select my object by clicking on it in my scene collection here, where it says cube. If you want to manipulate this object, you can move it. On the left-hand side, you can use these tools to manually move this object on whatever axis you need to, whether it's X, Y, or Z. Once you use the move tool, you can also hard type in, let's say I wanted 2.5, I could get close and then type in 2.5 and that will move it that way. You can also set the location here, and you can also tap in on your keyboard and you can go to item and you can change the location and the transform here. So if I wanted to put it at 0, 0, 2.5, you can do that here as well. If you want to use shortcuts to move your object, you can. So I'm going to go back to select, deselect. And I'm going to select my object and tap G. And with G, I can move my object. It's sort of attached to my cursor and is beholden to my camera view. If you tap G and then an axis, like let's say a Y, I can move it on the Y, or I can move it on the X, or I can move it on the Z. So that's helpful. The same thing goes for rotation. You can select the rotation tool and I can rotate it on Z or X or Y. I can also type them in if I use the rotate and then type in 90, for example, or 45 because it looks the same at 90 degrees. It works that way. You can also use a shortcut. You could tap R, Z for the Z axis, and then 45, enter. And then you can do it that way as well. So again, a few different ways. You can also, like before, tap N, and then you can set the rotation here in the transform. So a lot of different ways to do that. I'm going to put it back to 0, and then put the location back to 0. So that's move, rotate. There's also scale, which works in exactly the same way as we did before. So tap S, and you can scale it up, or you could use the tool manually. right? You can also scale and stretch it in different axes. Um, when you do scale, we'll talk about this a little later, but do be wary. Once I scale it, my object is now considered a cube that is scaled by essentially 3.39 times on the z. So anytime I use like a modified or some function to it, this will kind of like mess it up because it'll stretch it out. So if you're jumping a little bit ahead and you're having some issues with it, if you select your object, Control A, and then apply your transformations, or maybe just scale whatever you want to apply, it'll zero, well not zero, it'll put it back to 1, and then you should be good there. So that's really, really basic stuff. Move, rotate, scale, navigating 3D space. So let's actually model something. I have these examples open here, which we'll take a look at. These are some examples I did for kind of what I'm looking for some of your first 3D models. These are things that are just laying around on my desk. I have a Wacom pen. I have a stack of Post-it notes, a chapstick, a pink eraser, and then a roll of masking tape. And these are pretty simple models. Essentially cubes and cylinders and toruses and things like that. Using very basic tools, you can get away with modeling all of these things with just a few tools. And it's pretty simple, good way to get started. They also have some nice silhouettes. So make sure when you're starting out to build good habits with clean wireframes. We can take a look at the wireframes and see that they're pretty clean. And we have these nice bevels for nice shading. And we have smooth shading and sharp edges. And this may seem a little advanced quickly, but since we have a pretty short summer class, we have to move pretty quick. And I think like keeping the model simple, but with a lot of good details and silhouette is the way to go when time is of the essence. So these are linked in the assignment page, so you can look at them yourself. Just remember, you can model things of your own, or you can try to recreate these. Either way is fine. Just make sure whatever you do to have some sort of reference. Don't try to model something off the top of your head. Try to look at something you either have on hand, or maybe look at this so you can see what the shape looks like and try to like break it down into what tools translate to creating what kind of shapes, whether it's like a smooth edge or an indent or a bevel or something like that. So we'll go ahead and start. I probably will start with the chapstick. I think that's the most simple of the group here. So I'll minimize that. And back in Blender, I'm going to add a cylinder to start with. So I'm going to go to Mesh, Add, Cylinder. And by default, I have vertices 32. It's probably fine. I'm going to make it 16 just because it's a small object and probably don't need 32 edges. I don't know. I just feel like doing that. And then, so right now by default, it's set to 1 by 2 meters, which is a huge stick of chapstick. I'm just going to keep this by default, and then I'm going to manipulate the shape myself. Honestly, the size doesn't really matter too much. Starting out, just modeling things, I guess, relative to your scene and relative to each other. You're going to model all the objects here in the same Blender file. So long as they're relatively scaled proportionally, it's probably, I'm not going to worry like too much about like centimeters and meters and things like that. Once we get further on and we have to make things for like exporting to GIMP engines, I think it's more important. But for now, let's just focus on modeling. So I have this cylinder. First, I want to get the basic chapstick shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale it down. Scale it down a little bit. So my mouse was like really sensitive here. Oh, by the way, I'm using my I'm doing this in my work office. So my work office does not have good acoustics. and I do not have as good as a audio setup as I do at my home office. So I apologize if my voice sounds weird and there's echoing. It's not ideal, but I just have to kind of get this done where I'm at. Hopefully, future videos will be done in a much more polished way. But anyway, so what I did is I went into edit mode. So if you go to tab, once you select your object, you are now in edit mode. And we have vertices, which you can select and manipulate. I just drag a selection box around this group of vertices to select them. You can also click to select vertices. You can hold shift to select multiple vertices. This is edge mode. Edges, select edges. As you see here, so if I hold shift, I can select multiple edges. If you hold alt, you can select a whole loop of edges. And then this is face mode here. Faces, polygons used interchangeably, so I can manipulate the whole face. So before I just grabbed the face and I G and Z and kind of moved it up to get kind of like that proportion of what a chapstick container might look like. So there we go. So from here, if you look at the reference, that has a rounded top. It has a little indent where the cap meets the main part. And then at the bottom, we have this little inset that you use to twist and make the chopstick come out. So let's make all those components really quick. So right now, in class earlier, we went over just the basics of moving and going into edit mode and all that stuff. But now we're going to do something new, which is adding more detail to the model instead of just editing the existing model. So there's a couple ways to do that. One way is to add an edge loop. So I want to create the inset about where the cap would be about right here, but there's no place to do that. I need an edge or some sort of polygon face to add detail there. So we're going to go to edge and let's see, loop, cut, and slide. The shortcut key is Control R. So what you do is you put your cursor perpendicular to where you want the edge to be. Control R, click, and then you can kind of slide it into place. So I'll slide it about right there. So now it's in place, and there's my edge. So now you see I have a little more detail than I did before. So from here, if I want to pull that in, I could hold Alt. So let's go to the shortcut key for these modes, by the way, are 1, 2, 3. So if I do 2, hold Alt and click that edge, there's the edge. Now I can try to scale it in, but see what it does, it's pulling in the whole rest of the model. So I need a little bit more detail. So an easy way is to put a couple of loops in there and slide them in so that they are close to where I want them to be. So that's one way to do it. And then I can hold Alt and then S for scale, and then scale in just that loop. So you can scale in objects, whole objects obviously. And I can also scale in just that loop. And it gives me that nice little separation for the lid and the rest of the chopstick, container, thing, stick, whatever it is. So that's one way. Another way, I'm going to undo that, is I could also select that edge loop like that. I could use another tool called Bevel. So if I click here, there's Bevel Edges, Control B. So Control B, and I can separate it a tiny bit like that. Do 2 segments, zoom in a little bit, grab that loop, and then scale it in again. So that's another way. Bevel does a little split your edges, I guess, and you can do how many iterations it splits it by. So you saw that I added one in there. Bevel can also be used to create rounded edges. So if you look at the example here, I have this nice round edge. The chapstick's not 100% sharp like this, so I'm going to hold Alt, select that edge, Control B, and kind of give it a little bit of roundness there like that. So now I have a little bit of roundness on top. So that looks pretty good. Going back to my reference, so there's like the little thing on the bottom right here where you can actually twist to have the chapstick substance come in and out. So the way I'm going to do that is there's a couple ways you can do this. The first way I'm just going to show you is just using only the extrude tool. So if I do 3 to go to face mode, E for extrude, you can see I can extrude shapes, which is basically pulling shapes out of shapes. I don't know. How do you define extrude? I guess extruding more polygons out of an existing one. So if you select different polygons and tap E for extrude, you can kind of see what it does. You can also find extrude here in the faces menu. I want to extrude that little section here on the bottom, but when I do it, it kind of does that. Now I could extrude it and then put some edge loops in there and then shrink it and kind of form it up that way. An easier way is I will tap E for extrude, but I will not pull it out. I'll just click. Then I'll tap S, scale in that polygon I just made to create a little lip, and then extrude the rest down so you get that kind of shape. So that's better. You can also use the inset tool. So if I go to select that, go to face, inset, I is the shortcut. I essentially does the extrude scale combo all at once, and then E to extrude, and you can do it that way. So there's a couple ways to do it, whatever way you're most comfortable with. So now I extruded that little piece on the bottom that you used to crank up the chapstick. Also go to 2, select that edge, Control B to bevel again, create a little bevel on that edge, round that edge out, and then now I have a little rounded edge there. On the chapstick I have, this is actually a pretty hard edge, so I'll keep it that way. And then there. Something else you might notice is that this model has some nice smooth shading to it, whereas mine does not. If I go tab to object mode, mine is kind of faceted looking. So that's called smooth shading. If I select my model and I right click, I can do shade smooth and it shades it smooth, but this looks really weird. If I click and do base it back to shade flat, it looks like it did before. What shade smooth does is it takes the polygons and it averages the lighting across those polygon faces to create a smooth surface. If you just do shade smooth, it does it all at once. You might notice when I did it, I have this little option here to auto smooth. You can check auto smooth, and then it'll shade it based on the angle. So if I increase the angle, you can see when it starts grabbing additional faces. So I want you to start playing with this. Usually I don't have you work with this so soon, but since we don't have a lot of time, I think it's good to start early. So after you get your model done, the easiest way is to right click. You can do shade auto smooth and then do it here, or shade smooth and turn it on, either way. But just do that and then play with this angle until you get something you like. So I want enough of an angle to smooth out this round edge, but also keep this sharp where the two pieces come together for that nice sharp crease. So that's one way to do it. You can also, if I go to edge mode and select the edge, I can mark sharp. And what that does is it will override the smoothing and give you a sharp edge. So I selected this edge, right click, mark sharp, and that gave me a sharp edge. So sometimes if, I'm gonna go back and undo that. Sometimes if you use the auto smooth and and it's sort of making something smooth that you don't want to, you can go back and add sharp edges that way. So there's the chapstick. For this assignment, I want you to name and number everything. So for this, I want you to just come over here. This is the object, this is the name. You could double click on the word cylinder there. Let's do 1, chapstick. And then if you want, you can GY to slide it over out of the way. Then you can make the next one. So I'll do one more before I set you free to do your own. This is pretty much the same as this, except there's just more insets, more scaling to get like the point and things like that. But essentially scale, inset, extrude, bevel, all that to create this is done already. So maybe I will do this post-it note pile because it's different. It's using a cube. So I'm going to go back. So I'm going to go add mesh cube. So there's my cube. That looks about the size, maybe a little bigger of a post-it note compared to chapstick. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to scale it in this way this time. So there's my stack of post-it notes. Like that. So this one, a couple of different methods here. So you see I have like this, sometimes the post-it notes will kind of separate a little bit and you'll get kind of like these like lines in it. So I'll do that for basically all I did is I took this model of the stack and I duplicated it and just kind of moved it up a little bit. So the shortcut in Blender for duplicate is Shift D and then G and Z kind of move it up a little bit. S for scale and Z, make it a little different size. And then G, Z to move it back down in place. Maybe like that. So you get like the little separation. If you want to get really fancy, you could do R for rotate around the Y. You could rotate it like a tiny, tiny bit, maybe even less than that. Maybe even like barely anything, just enough. So it looks like it's still kind of, actually you can even, okay, let's undo. Just rotate Y. So I'm going to rotate it, zoom in, and then use click and drag here. So like something like that. Where it looks like it's still kind of attached on this end, but it's kind of separating here, like maybe there's a crease or something. And then I did kind of like the corners coming up, you can see. So that uses another different tool. So I'm going to go into edit mode for this top face here. So I'm going to select the top face and then I'm going to duplicate just the face, Shift D, and then kind of move that up a tiny, tiny bit. Z, tap Z to move it up straight up. So now that's off the surface a little bit, like so. And then I'm going to get the knife tool. This is a little bit advanced. Well, you could keep it like this, and this looks pretty good. But I do want to get that corner in there. So I'm going to tap, let's see, K, and let's just, this is another tool. So the knife tool lets you draw polygons. So if I click and click and click and click and enter, I create this polygon. But this is bad, don't do that. That's messy. If you want to use the knife tool, which is K, you want to click on an edge and end on an edge, right? So if I want to make just, maybe I'll do just this one corner here. So I'll click and then enter. So now I have this little edge. If I tap 1 or go to vertex mode, I can grab that little corner, GZ, kind of move it up a little bit. So that's how you get that little corner coming up. And that's it. So now we got this. So this gives it, I'm going to do a little more just to exaggerate it. GZ. GZ, come on, come on, come on. Tab. There we go, really come up. So the only problem with this, and this is another lesson, I wanted to do this just to give you some things to think about as a beginner, is we talked about faces, polygons, right? All these polygons are four-sided. So they have 4 sides. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Even all the faces on this one except for the top, which we'll talk about that. But all the other faces have 4 sides. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are called quads. And if your polygon has 3 sides, or your face has 3 sides like that one, that's 3. 1, 2, 3. That's a tri or a triangle, right? So you want to keep your models mostly quads and then sometimes triangles when you need triangles. The reason is because when you have quads, you can do stuff like this, where if I do Control R, I get a nice edge loop, and it goes all the way around. If I try to do that here, well, let's see. Oh, these are 2 different. Okay, I kind of did this the wrong way. I'll show you how to fix that. You see, I can't really do one across the top. That's because these aren't quads. This is called an n-gon. So an n-gon is any kind of polygon or face that has more than 4 sides. This has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So in this case, you probably just want to get the knife tool, grab, and just kind of pull that across, enter. So now I have, this has 4 sides, this has 3, this has 4. Now I could do an edge loop around. Hang on, Jesus. Okay. Let me just grab up. That way I can actually, okay. I have an error. Let's see, tab. All right, so when I was messing around, I accidentally put these extra points in here. So those points are giving it additional sides, which you can see selecting here. Since the components of this post-it note are so close together, I was adding these loops and whatever. Okay, so I'll select these vertices and tap X and then dissolve vertices. If you do delete vertices, it'll take the polygon width, which you don't want, so you just want to do dissolve vertices. Now I can do a loop across the top because everything is nice and neat and 4 sides. Oops, Control Z. So that's kind of like a case in point. If you have an edge loop like around here that you don't want, if you hold Alt to select it, X, dissolve edges. And then now I'm going to select this whole chunk with shift. Another shortcut is if I hover over and tap L, then it'll select linked, which by default I think it's on normal, which will select a chunk or a whole component. And then I can GZ, move that down. So now I have that piece. I accidentally made this 2 different models. So I'm going to select one, hold shift, select another one, and then Control J will join them into one object. So there's my post-it note. That one was a little more involved than I thought. But that's okay. It's done. I might do one more. I might do one more just because that one turned out to be not that smooth. So I'm gonna move it over. All right, so let's do one more. Let's do this roll of tape. I'm gonna go add mesh and torus. Actually, there's a couple ways to make that shape. You can start with a torus. You can also start with a cylinder. One of them, I don't know which one would be easier for like a beginner. Actually, maybe a cylinder. Let's just do a cylinder. Let's go to mesh, cylinder, and then let's just make the depth less. And probably about that big, I would say. Okay. Actually, you know what? Since this thing is bigger, I'm gonna add more. I'm gonna do this 24, make it smoother, and then make it bigger. There we go. Okay. So in order to make that cutout shape here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to tab into edit mode, select the top, hold shift, select the bottom. I'm gonna inset both of these at the same time, and this will be like the thickness of the tape roll. So I'll click tap I. So we'll say about that much. Looks about right. And now this is like where it gets tricky. This is where modeling can kind of get tricky really quickly. Is after I do that, if I tap X and delete those faces, now I have this kind of like hole cut out here. But the problem is that I have no inside, so it's just kind of left blank. So another tool is if I go to edge mode here, hold Alt, select, hold Shift, select bottom, then go to edge, bridge edge loops. It'll bridge those two gaps and give you this shape here. So that's one way to do it. The way I was going to do it with the torus was just make the torus the general shape and then delete the edges that make it look curved. I think this way isn't that bad either. And then from here, you can see, so for the tape roll, the tape is actually a little bit separated from the cardboard ring. It actually kind of is a little bigger than it. So I'm going to go to tab and I'm going to select the inside. So you can go around and select the inside like this or hold Alt. If you hold Alt, you can select it all at once. And I'm just going to tap E for extrude one time and then S and then pull this in a little bit. And then after that, I'm going to select that, to select this edge, hold Shift, Alt, select that edge. So this one's getting a little crazy too, right? I'm going to bevel, Control B, and that's going to give me that. I only need one segment. So far, so good. And then if I select the resulting edges here, those inside ones, Shift Alt, like that, I can do a scale Z, and that will kind of scale it in a little bit and give me a little bit of that separation from the tape roll, like that. So you get a little bit of detail there. Actually, I might select the inside of the tape roll like this as well, because that corner looks a little sharp and doesn't quite look right, so I'm going to bevel that a little bit as well. So Control B. Something weird is happening. Let's see, did I mess it up? No. Oh, Control B. So you know what it might be? I'm gonna go back to object mode here, and let's just do Control A, apply all transformations. So first, let me just grab these two edges here and just scale them on the Z to get them closer together. So that'll kind of fix that weird kind of like taper look, and then Control B for a little bevel. There we go, looks better. So I have a little bit of a soft edge on the cardboard ring, a little thickness and separation there. So far so good. And then for the, I think I have a little piece of tape like sticking off. Yeah, a little extra. So you always want to put little details there, right? Little silhouette details like the corner coming up, the rounded edges, the little ring on the bottom, stuff like that. Like all these little silhouette details really sell 3D models, even if they're really simple. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going to go into edit mode. I'm going to select an edge and extrude the edge. If you do just the edge, you get this kind of deal. And maybe just a little bit. And then I'm going to move the. So here's a trick too. Let's say I want to line this up more. If I hold Alt and get close to like one of these views, it'll snap it to orthographic view, which is a flat view. So that'll let me kind of like do that a little bit, and then I'll extrude one more to kind of like do that kind of deal. Like the tape is kind of coming up a little bit. So it looks kind of like that. See, nice little. And then again for this, you want some nice smooth edges here. So let's edit mode, right click, shade auto smooth. Let's bring the angle down a little bit. So this is one that's getting tricky. Actually, this looks pretty good. So I want to get like the inside and the outside smooth, but also want still the separation here, which I think I got pretty good. And there's the tape roll. So I got that nice detail here. This one's a little lower res than my example, but it still works. And I have my little piece coming off. And then this will be 3. All right, so from here, just get your 5 objects done really simple. Just focus on, move, rotate, scale, using primitives. Make sure you're using insert edge loop and extrude and inset, bevel. Those are like the key modeling tools. Do the auto shade smooth. Watch your wireframes so they're nice and clean, and you have 3 or 4 sides to your models. You need to merge multiple shapes. Control J will merge shapes. What else? I'm just kind of trying to review everything. Shift D duplicates. Hopefully this will be a lot of stuff. I know it's a lot just to like throw at you, but keep it simple. Model some objects, pay attention to silhouette, add little details where you can, get some smooth shading, and you should be good. So that's it for this lecture or video. Let me know if you have any questions.